you have a very kind of thoughtful and deep insight to Sombrada, not just Sombrada, but all of martial arts and Filipino martial arts. Was this something that you sort of came to Filipino martial arts with, or was it something that developed over time?
Sort of a broad question. I think it's in my nature to be iconoclastic, which I talk about a lot. I think that you mentioned my dad, that goes back to my father, not believing just because it came from a particular source that it's necessarily accurate or true. So I've always been one to say, that's a great piece of information. Let me investigate it myself and see if it's true and see if it's true for me. So to me, teachers are simply sources of information. So that's not to disrespect them or denigrate them in any way, but that's what they are. I don't see them as guides to my spiritual being, etc. So they're just resources. So as a teacher, as an instructor, my job is to not just parrot what a teacher showed me and hand it off. Because if you go back to the telephone game, that's likely to diminish the art. So so many teachers, so many people who purport to be teachers are really just parrots. And I take issue with that kind of an instructor. So from my perspective, my job as a teacher is to take whatever it is that I've learned, research it personally, dig into it very deeply, and then not only convey that knowledge in a more accurate way than perhaps it was originally given to me, but also to add my own insights to that. So it's just sort of my nature to do that.
Guro, of all the things that you as you well know, much more than I do, Filipino martial arts is so vast. It encompasses many aspects of combat and formats. Why did you decide to release this Sombrada course first?
It's in teaching seminars for years and years. It's one of the things that is often asked of me. I guess people have seen me doing it on videos and so forth, and they want to get deeper into it. And the proliferation of the 6-count box pattern that I talk about a lot in the videos is so rampant out there that it just kind of makes me insane. In fact, I may have mentioned in one of the videos that I've actually said to groups that have asked me to come and teach seminars, the best thing you could do with regard to the way you're currently practicing Sombrada is to just go home and watch television. Don't do it anymore, because it's actively making you worse. So it's because it is it can be such a pillar of the art. It can be so powerful in adapting every other aspect of the art, whether disarms, checking, etc. It is such a litmus test, a melting pot of those kind of things where you can go in and test it. It's so useful that doing it in a pattern form and doing it in the waste of time way that I see so many people doing it, it's kind of hurtful to me. The art actually matters to me, and its proliferation as a sort of a storehouse of the genius of the Filipino people is really important to me. So I don't want it to just devolve into this ridiculous patty cake exercise that people are doing. So that really was the key. I have a lot of other things that I'm going to be bringing out that go much more in depth into the advancement of Sombrada and basically the dissolving of Sombrada entirely to where you're essentially following no format whatsoever and doing it in a safe way. This is the way that I was taught, and I've researched it more and more and more, and it's what I want to get out there because it's not taught a lot. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. One of the things I really like about listening to you in some of your interviews is how you relate to martial arts to other aspects. And so you'd say something like, well, that would make sense in sort of a visual art kind of way, or that wouldn't make sense, or this principle should be echoed in physics or something like that. And I often think of martial arts the way that I do with food, or I was really big into hip hop as a younger man, and so just elements of hip hop, whether it's graffiti or freestyle rapping or scratching on turntables, and so in like the hip hop world, as an example, you would never want to. It was always seen as a major violation if you sort of bit someone else's style and you're trying to make your own name rapping like whoever it was. So it was always influenced where you had to put out something that was fresh, where it was unique. It was something distinctly yours, but at the same time, still trying to pay homage and pay respect, and also be in the constraints of whatever it is. So for instance, graffiti, there's a lot of evolutions that have happened over the many decades of graffiti, but there's still, maybe this is very much like martial arts. It's not so much written as like a recipe or a prescribed formula, but there's certain things that it has to fit in, or else it's just sort of cool looking, very abstract art. There's still,
you can stylistically wander off into the forest.
Yeah.
It can be very silly. And on a certain level, and I think some people might take issue with me saying this, on a certain level, I mean, the last time I had to, and I have used my art in the real world. Let's make that clear. But the last time I had to go out and get into a violent stick fight with somebody was, I don't remember. Okay, it's the likelihood, if you're training seriously and you're serious about the inner aspect, about being a more peaceful person and all those things, the likelihood that you'll never have to use it is very, very high. So if all martial arts, let's forget about the Philippines, for example, forget about the stick, forget about specific style, let's just look at martial arts in general. If all martial arts is how to injure or kill your fellow man, then this is not something that people should be spending their time doing. Mm-hmm. And it has to be, that's terrible. What a terrible thing to invest yourself in and focus your mind on a daily basis. That leads nowhere positive. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if you understand how to put it in context and how to balance yourself, martial arts can actually provide a very clear understanding of the world. Bruce used to say that life is combat and should be approached as such. So I think the Filipino martial arts, because it is so rooted in a kind of warfare that especially Westerners really don't understand. You still have a lot of post-World War II mentality in this country where it's I mean, even when I was a kid, because I'm older than most of my students, but when I was a kid, if you kicked in a fight, you were a sissy. So kicking was out, you couldn't do that. Not until the Kung Fu craze happened in the 70s was kicking a cool thing to do. And now you think, oh, I'm going to take you down, I'm going to ground and pound you. As much as that seems like a horrible thing to do, it isn't anything as horrible as some of what the Filipinos figured out to do against their enemies for centuries upon centuries. So when I show the patay aspect, the killing aspect of the Filipino martial arts, I've seen people near to throwing up because it's awful business. And if we look at the reality of that, if we look at the hardcore brutality of what this art was intentionally designed to do, it forces us to ask questions that have been asked by thousands of people over thousands and thousands of years. Of how is this affecting me? How is it affecting my tribe, my village, my nation? How does my training in this art affect everyone else when I turn my mind into this darkness, if you will? So when we go back and we step all the way back out, and you say, well, I can look at this art from the entablado side, from the beautiful side, from the artistic side, from the athletic side. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I said to a guy I know who teaches Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he was putting down, which is a frequent thing amongst martial artists, that he was putting down somebody doing XMA, which is the really complicated, quadruple spin kicks and so forth. I said, okay, it's not designed to be combative, and you can put it down, but can you do it? Because that's all he's doing. He's saying, I can do this. That's what that art is for. He's pushing the envelope of his physical capacity. There's nothing wrong with that. And having developed that capacity, it's going to alter his life in the same way that me going into that darkness will alter my life in a slightly different way. But there's so many aspects of the martial art that's not just about the brutality of destroying your fellow man. There's so much more to it than that. So even within Sombra, I take issue because if you watch, I put out a couple of videos just recently of my old training partner, Burton Richardson, and I doing Sombra. And it's such a long time ago now, 36 years ago. But if you watch, when I'm doing the Sombra with him, and Bert's terrific, by the way, just a permanent brother of mine. When you watch I'm intentionally doing demonstration style Sombra. I'm doing entablado. I'm making the motions very big, so they're very attractive to watch. They draw you in. That's not exactly the same way I would do Sombra if I was teaching it to you from the combative or patai aspect, but both are valuable, because if I wanted to draw somebody in, I'll do the entablado style. I'll open it up and make it larger. I touch on that a little bit in my course, but the course is really focused on the patai aspect, the actual doing of the art for real. So,
but I feel like sometimes martial artists in general, or maybe just contemporary martial artists, have a tendency to make things too literal. You know, like if it doesn't, they'll say like, well, when would that work on the street, or how would you pull this off in real life? But you know, my brother for many years was a competitive ballroom dancer, and you know, they whatever the classical, whatever the dance. I don't really know anything about that, but I would never go to one of those competitions and say like, oh, this would never work in the club in a street battle against someone that was dancing that way.
It's specifically a martial arts disease that you're talking about. That
Yes.
we can sit in our basement, in our armchair in front of our computer, and we can criticize things. And it is frustrating. There should be a dialogue. There should be skepticism, and people really need to understand the difference between skepticism and cynicism, because a lot of people's comments are cynical as opposed to skeptical, and I think they just don't understand the difference. I'm completely skeptical, but I don't need to be judgmental. That's where cynicism comes in. I can ask questions, but I can also just take in, for lack of a better word, a performance. Look at it and go, hey, that's athletically interesting. They're moving well. My opinion, based on my experience, which is however much experience I have, which is a lot in my case, but it doesn't matter. I'm still limited by the viewpoint of my experience. It's the old analogy of the 5 or 6 blind men describing an elephant. Okay? Mm-hmm. One guy will say it's really long and moves around, or will say it's like a tree, because his perspective is unique. So I agree with you that oftentimes, and I kind of expect, I haven't yet, but it's only been out for like a day and a half or 2 days, but I expect to get all kinds of, oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. And I think I even say a couple of times in the video that I'll mention a couple of Filipino terms, and then I'll flat out say I don't care what the Filipino terms are. You know, there's so many different dialects. It's just a ridiculous, endless argument. So forget it. In fact, one of my Filipino teachers said that I should change everything to English. Said because that just eliminates the rivalries and the arguments. So,
yeah.
So yeah,
well, that's what we would do. You know, for instance, in medicine, there's, as you know, because of your work doing medical illustration, or just, you know, your just insight into things. We frequently call things the calf and not the gastrocnemius, and you know, just because you have to. It's aside from sort of just using those terms, just maybe just to show that you know them. It's not necessarily it's not the most functional in the context of whatever's happening and what's going on.
It's interesting you bring that up, because several years ago, one of my students is a neurosurgeon, and several years ago we were conversing about the difficulty of language within the martial arts, because the language can be so fraught with those rivalry things with dialects, and also it can be so metaphorical. So many things, like the term abanico. It's why not just a rotating strike? So why do we have to call it some metaphorical name? So and you understand this from the medical side. He said that he can get on the phone with a neurosurgeon who's in the middle of an operation on the other side of the earth, that he himself has more experience with than the surgeon who is presently doing the operation. And because he has more experience, he can explain to him over the phone what to do. The language is so accurate and so specific that he can save that patient's life. And I said I would really like to be able to do that in martial arts. And you'll notice in the course that I actually bring up the idea of nomenclature and how to communicate about the techniques, so that we can all have the same terms, so that we're not arguing about them, but we're actually moving forward with the art as opposed to arguing about the names of the techniques. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's it's something that I take issue with, and I have specifically clarified the names, and I think I do a couple of times in the course. So just one of my things. And I'm kind of known as a guy who, because of my foundation in anatomy, I'm constantly bringing up anatomy. And I have a couple of doctors in my school, a couple of surgeons and so forth. So I think they really appreciate that I'll actually say caudally, or and I'll kind of go like this. Most people in the audience don't know what I mean, but or I'll use medial, lateral, superior, inferior. I'll use terms like that all the time.
Yeah.
And I say I take great issue if you're going to attack the bicep with a gunting. What part of the bicep, and what are you doing physiologically to it, or are you just hitting the bicep? So yeah, I'm very particular about the specifics of the anatomy. So,
well, I do think that that's one of the great things, if you can be succinct with your terminology, irregardless of the culture that it comes from, or for the tradition's sake. Dr. Fauci, of all people, I had listened to him, a recording of like a commencement that he gave for a high school. And he talked about in his own high school education, something that he took away. I really liked the way that he phrased it. He said through the writing and through the academics, it gave him economy of expression and precision of thought. And I really like that if you can do it well, and you can say whatever the term is, even some powerlifters, they'll talk about like a good coach can make corrections on their students with as few prompting words as possible. They can just say, look straight, look up, your heel, whatever it would be. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
I just actually had a similar conversation the other night in class, because I had a student perform a particular sequence of techniques, and then I asked people for their point of view. Not particularly a critique, but tell me what you saw, tell me what you might correct. And the natural thing, especially the more junior person is to go after every single thing and start just basically dismantling the whole thing. And I said, well, if this was a new student, how would those 600 points help this person? What would be the one singular thing that you would change? And I had them perform the same technique again, and everybody came up with something different. And when I finally pointed out simply the stick was a little bit too high in the action and bring it all down, they realized that bringing that stick down corrected all of the other points. And that's fundamentally, when it comes to the actual correction, as you use the word coaching, I don't generally consider myself a coach, but you are coaching people in a sense. The real secret to it is figuring out what is the one thing, because there's usually one thing that will fix it all, maybe two, but usually one. So
yeah. The other thing that got me really interested in Sombrata, not just in your perspective and your insight, was just that, I guess over the last year, I was watching a lot of stuff on social media, on the internet, and it really seemed like I certainly can't say if all FMA systems have some kind of Sombrata. They don't always call it Sombrata. Do you think that that happens because of the nature of weapon fighting, that we need to afford at least some sort of distance, almost like a safety, so we can practice it in a way that's not overwhelmingly brutal?
Well, absolutely. Certainly, even if you go to Western fencing, I mean, with the advent of the fencing mask, because I've certainly fenced without a mask on, which is a terrifying thing to do, but it is something you can do if you're using blunts or rubber tips on your rapier. But I think the idea of exchanging techniques, we can call it Sombrata, there's lots of other names for it. The reason I use the term Sombrata is out of respect for the culture and people that came up with it. So, but I'm also fine with calling it counter for counter. It's fine with me. I actually, interestingly enough, is I fenced for over 20 years, and I actually taught my fencing teacher, who was a fencing grandmaster, phenomenal guy. I taught him how to do Sombrata in Western fencing, and he started teaching it to all of his students.
Wow.
So, because it is a valuable exercise, because the whole idea is that you can create a circumstance that can have a relatively large element of chaos. To me, exercise that includes chaos defines that exercise as sparring. If everything is preset, then now there's no chaos. So, and chaos can certainly also come in as a factor of speed and so forth, but really chaos comes from not knowing what the next technique is going to be. So, but when you teach Western fencing, oftentimes it's taught in very simple sequences. I'm going to do an extension, you're going to parry, it's very, very clear. But to get it going back and forth and have it stay alive for a while rather than always stopping is, even in bouting and competitive fencing, there's an action and then they stop and they say what the action was. And as I said to him, if this was a real fight with real swords, we would not stop. So teaching yourself to stop all the time is suicidal. So the whole point of sobriety, in fact, I say it in the course, is don't stop. That's the number one mistake, is everybody stops. Just keep going. I will intentionally make it so that your shots don't make contact with my stick, for example, because as one of the habits that comes, especially with new people, is that they look for the sound. They click, 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 and just don't make the sound. They lose track of themselves entirely. So one of the first things I'll eliminate is the reliance upon that clicking sound or even that feeling of impact. The whole point, and I say it all the time, when we advance this art, by the way, do you speak the language? You speak Tagalog?
Basically, no.
So
I can't take any credit for it.
I can't take any credit. Well, there's a word in Tagalog, kamalayan, which is just basically means to be very aware, to be very present. It's the name that I use for the much higher aspect of the art, what I oftentimes call the apex of the art. No shape, no form, no set patterns, literally none whatsoever. No reliance on a give and take. So I can just completely dominate you. So when we do kamalayan, I can actually beat you. So it would be the equivalent of, in Japanese, what we would call randori, or in English rolling. But no patterns, no nothing. It's what will make Sombrada make even more sense to you when you do it. Because now you'll understand what Sombrada is for. If you ever fence, you know that a foil, one of the first weapons they teach you, is not a weapon really at all. It's the guard is too small to be functional. The blade being square is too flexible. So the whole point of having this sort of neutered, useless weapon is to emphasize certain aspects of fencing. And if you understand that, then it's valuable. But just like in Sombrada, more often than not, the student is not informed as to what this tool is for and what the objective of their learning is. They're just thrown into the shallow or mid-shallow end and say, okay, do this. And they may wander around in that shallow end for years, thinking they're fencing. No, when you do the 6 count, for example, and you're not actually aiming and you're too far away to actually make contact, you're actually practicing not doing it. Nobody's ever going to attack you with any of those attacks because you're not aiming. So you're practicing defending against attacks that will never come. It's so terrible that, like I said, it would be better to just go home and watch television. It's so bad. So when you bring back the real aiming, when you bring back the actual distance, the actual pressure, the understanding of distance and quadrants and pressure zones and all of that, people start to realize that they're actually, as cliche as it is, you're actually learning how to fight. So Sombrada is an exercise in learning how to solve problems. And I can use this term with somebody who's in medicine in an exigent circumstance. You have 0 time, you don't have the tools you need, you don't have the time to acquire those tools, so how are you going to solve it right now? And I can make those actions happen so quickly, quick being different than fast. Fast is velocity, quick is time. I can make it happen so quickly that all your cool techniques just won't work. You don't have time to make them work. So now what we're going to do. And that really, from a teaching standpoint, that's what it's for. It's a what if? What if this happens? What are you going to do? Where are you? Can you make that action happen? In fact, I don't actually think I bring this up in the course, but there's 4 questions that you can ask, and people should write these down. So get your pen and paper. When an action that you are attempting to execute on your opponent isn't working, what are the 4 questions you ask? This, by the way, is from that wonderful grandmaster of fencing that I studied with, who's since passed away. The first question is, did I choose the right technique? Did I have the right distance? Did I have the right time? And what do you think the last one would be? Did I execute it properly?
Mm-hmm.
It's all fine and good to say, oh, I did the right technique, but you may have done it wrong. So those four, and now if you flip that around, if the opponent is succeeding in executing a technique on you, what are the four questions you ask yourself then? The first question is, what is he doing? How is he doing it? What can I do? And can I do it? And this really goes into Sombra, because the objective is, because of the parameters, we've already set some of the parameters. Let's be ridiculous. I'm not spitting in your face. I'm not kicking you in the groin. I'm not kicking you in the shins. We're removing a whole bunch of things. Okay? I'm not intentionally running you off the side of the building. There's so many things that could be a part of it that we omit so that we can take care of each other. So we're probably going to set whatever the distance is. Normally, the way I teach Sombra, we begin at intermediate range. You could start at long range. You could go to close range. The range is immaterial. You can work at all ranges. But let's start at intermediate range. So we've already preset those parameters. And now I'm going to say, okay, when you land X shot and I immediately come back to the next shot, what is the correct answer? Can you do it? That's the key. Now, if you can't do it, and you know it's the correct answer, because I, as the instructor, am saying, yes, you've actually chosen the right technique, so we don't have to wander off into the forest looking for other techniques. But now, since you're not able to do it, what's missing? What's wrong? And rather than just giving them the information, the old giving a fish, I want to teach them how to fish. I want to teach them how to look for it, and how to have some principle-based understanding of how to do that exploration. And this goes back to the idea of somebody using a scientific approach. Again, you being in the medical profession, so many people, especially in the Filipino martial arts, but in the martial arts in general, will say that they take a scientific approach. And me being the SOB that I am, the first thing I'll say is, can you explain the scientific approach to me? Because don't claim it unless you can actually, talk about it. So more often than not, all they're doing is experimenting, but they're not actually cataloging what they do. So they're try this, try that. I'll oftentimes say that the approach most people take, if whatever they're doing works, they don't know why it worked. If it doesn't work, they don't know why it didn't work. That's not a scientific approach.
Yeah, that's very chaotic, really.
Yes. It's also dangerous. It's also dangerous, especially when you're playing with weapons. I mentioned a couple of times the danger. I have myself in other schools when I've gone to teach. I think a lot of times people will try to impress me because I've been teaching for a long time. So they'll send their best guys out to do a demonstration, and so often I see them injure each other. And I've seen terrible injuries, people breaking their teeth off, people just getting seriously injured. Weapons don't forgive you. You can't play that game. I also have a couple of, like the skull over there in the corner, real human skulls. So I bring it out a lot to show people not only the thinness of the bone that they're attacking and where it's vulnerable and where it's not so vulnerable, but also to remind them, this may echo something that you went through. When I studied anatomy, the professor said something great. He said, you don't have a skeleton, you are a skeleton. You have to think in those terms when you're trying to convey this information. As a teacher, I try to do that all the time. I try to make the learning of how they're doing something to an opponent, I try to turn it around and bring it to them. One of my teachers used to say that your first intention is to turn the opponent's mind inward. Get them thinking about themselves. So Bruce Lee used to say the best way to psych out an opponent is with pain. That's essentially the same thing. Get them thinking about themselves. So if I turn your index finger into talcum powder, you're probably not going to be thinking about how badly you want to hurt me. Now you're thinking, oh my God, my hand, and you can't hold that weapon anymore. So the whole objective is to bring it. And again, when we talk about the real, people can get kind of a wince reaction because that is the intention. But what do you think I'm doing with this weapon? We're not playing a child's game. I'm not. In fact, I say it all the time. I'm not going to aim at your head. I'm going to aim at your eye. I don't have to be powerful. I have a 5 foot tall student, female student. I'm pretty sure if she just went like that, she would ruin your day. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if there's a little piece of sand gets in your eye, it's the same thing.
all it's about is accuracy. So power is great, and certainly we want to develop power, but there's an overemphasis on the athleticism. And you have to remember how many, I've certainly studied with several old guys who I was far and away superior to in every physical aspect because I was a young guy and they were an old man. But they could still destroy me.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't about those physical attributes. It wasn't. It was about mastery of distance, time, and position, period. So
Guro, on your, in the pictures that I've seen, which I also still like to look at in the course because you're at your old school, and you have, you know, a lot of wonderful illustrations on the wall. But one of the things that you did have that I noticed was the OODA loop.
Oh, yeah.
The observe, orient, decide, and act. When we're talking about, I really very much like your idea of Sombra being a tool to kind of develop immediate presence and awareness. I guess more for myself, how does that, are you allowing an opportunity for them to broaden or hone that observation aspect of the OODA loop so that the orientation, decide, and the act then cycle faster?
Good question. First of all, you can take so many different paths with Sombra. It's one of the reasons why it's a pillar, because I can illuminate so many different things within the exercise. It's certainly not singularly focused. The idea of the awareness, for example, I will do Sombra with you, for example, and I'll get you going. So we get past a speed where you're comfortable. So let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, you're used to training. I'm just going to grab a number. You're used to training at a 5 or a 6. So I'm going to take it up to a 6.5 or a 7. Just a little bit faster than you're used to doing, but not to where you start to react with just fear. And then I'll say, okay, what am I doing differently? Because I may change the way I'm checking. I may change the way I'm positioning my body. I may be there's a couple of things I can do. I don't think I go this advanced in the course. But there's a couple of things I can do to make it very difficult for you to check me, even though I'm still hitting all the targets that I'm aiming at. And rather than just show it to you, again, the giving a fish idea, I'll say, what is it that I'm doing? What do you see? And the natural tendency, and I think this comes from the way the scholastic education system works. The natural education is to just start guessing. And that's not what I want. And I'll actually call people and I say, don't guess. You don't know. I don't know is a perfectly good answer. But if you tell me you don't know, well, now I know where to help you. But if you start guessing, now I'm having to deal or contend with these BS kind of answers. So the first thing we'll do is push the guessing aside. Get them to actually start eliminating the idea of guessing, because it's really it's very alluring to just throw out answers hoping that you'll be right. Once again, if you're right, you don't know why you're right. If you're wrong, you don't know why you're wrong. That's not learning. So I don't expect people to be. It's a very grown-up thing, and I'm saying that facetiously. It's a very grown-up thing to think that when you walk into my school, you should already know what I'm teaching you. It's no child walks into any new experience thinking that they should already know it. But especially because there's this mantle placed on males that they're supposed to be able to protect the family. And so a lot of guys want to say, oh, yes, I understand this. In fact, I've gotten several responses to the little ads I've put out for the course. And I can tell that the person is responding to me as if they totally understand what I'm teaching. And I've trained with them. I know that they absolutely don't understand what I'm teaching. Yeah. So that's a dilemma. That's really a dilemma, because there's a saying in science that's really important to know, that you can know just enough about something to not realize that you don't know anything about it.
Yes, absolutely.
So since when we're really studying, when we really look at this from a hopological standpoint, when we're actually studying the martial application of physical principles, not knowing is important. Not knowing what you don't know, that you've heard the saying, knowledge is power. That doesn't mean knowing everything. That means knowing what you don't know, as well as what you do know. That's power, because now I know when, for example, if I know I'm not strong enough to contend with you, I know it's time to run. That's power. But if I think I'm strong enough because I haven't actually tested it, now that's weakness. Now
Yes.
you know what I mean? So it's difficult because I think a lot of people will go into this course, and I hope that they don't. I really hope that they don't. I really want people to just, it's the advantage of a course where they can just sit in their silence and watch something that nobody's making any comments about. It's just information provided. Maybe they'll just let their facade down for a moment. It's okay to not know. There's a lot of things I don't know. If I had to take over your job today, I would be utterly lost. Okay? It's just that the reality is it's that we only know things from our own experience. So it's a terrible thing in the martial arts world where people presume that they have to know everything. The best guys I've met are the guys who, and I think it's a factor of age. Just recently, you may know who Romeo Mark, you know, just Filipino. Romeo's, first of all, a hilarious guy. He's got a sense of humor like nobody's business. And we had a great time working out together and talking and so forth. But the most amazing thing about Romeo is that he does not put on airs whatsoever. He knows what he knows, and he knows what he doesn't know. And he speaks from authority on the things he does know about. And when he doesn't know, he's inquisitive. He's got that mind of a child. The wonder, which is a great word, the wonder is still present. And I think, certainly when I first came to martial arts as a little kid, I was just in awe of this thing, this amazing stuff that you could do. And I certainly went through my period of, I know this now, because you really want the respect. I've always been, I don't know if it's still the case, but I've always looked younger than I am. So I've just had that gift / curse. In the martial arts world, it was a curse because oftentimes I would have 30 years experience on somebody, and they would think I was younger than them, so they wouldn't have any respect for me. So that's tending to diminish now as I age more and more. But that idea of looking at the art with wonder, and when I teach, first of all, I learn more than my students do when I teach, because I'm stealing from them all the time. I'm watching the subtleties that they're doing. I'm not only enhancing and enriching my ability to convey the art to other people, but I'm also enriching my own understanding. So to me, the wonder is present. It's why I look forward to class, because I still have that wondrous feeling about martial arts, and I hope that people will remind themselves that that's what brought them to the art in the first place, and hopefully watch this course from that standpoint and realize that, first of all, have you watched the entire thing or some of it yet?
So I've skipped around. If I sort of use the LP analogy, like I put the needle in a bunch of places. So I'm like, oh, what else? What are the other tracks?
I designed it to be just like that. So you don't have to go A, B, C, D. I just want you to be able to open it up, watch it. Like, you can go back to it a couple times. I designed it to be like that. So as you look at it, though, you'll start to realize I'll touch on things a couple of different times from different standpoints. But the whole point is I'm trying to get people to remember that there's something about this that draws them in. They wouldn't have bought it in the first place if they weren't interested. So since that wonder is already there, enough wonder to spend that much money on it, put aside your skepticism, put aside your cynicism, just open your mind and watch. Because I think people, first of all, I would love, obviously from a financial standpoint, I would hope it sells, but move that aside. I would love that in a year or 2 years, I go to a seminar and I can see that people have been affected by that information out there. Because then I don't spend the whole seminar having to take a wrecking ball through everything that they're doing. I'm really tired of doing that. The art is so beautiful and so ingenious, and I'm tired of having to explain to people that they haven't even scratched the surface yet. You're wandering around in the darkness because you're doing this ridiculous pattern. Just let that go. Let it fade into the sand and rebuild a new boat that actually makes sense.
Yeah. So, it's like, after a certain point, when I was younger, I liked to, paint by numbers or something. But if I really wanted to express myself in my own art, I guess in theory, I could just get really good at doing paint by numbers and find really cool paint by numbers templates and then paint them and then hang them on my wall or something. But, I think it's one of the things as when people go through, especially Filipino martial arts, I know this definitely for myself, there's a period where you want to learn all the drills and, oh, this is, so they do this or this, what's the next drill or what's the next sequence? And I think for myself, as someone that has spent some time in the martial arts and is still trying to discover and, like, I no longer feel like I need to try to learn and acquire all the drills that are out there. First, I don't think that's possible. But second, I've learned so much and I've done so much, but I've gone through so much, I should probably say. But what have I actually done with the stuff that I've learned? Like, how have I explored it? One of the themes that I like in not just the course, but in a lot of things that you talk about is how can you sort of make your own contribution? How can you put something forth that's uniquely your own?
You're talking about something that is super important, and that's the seeking of security. All of those things, becoming capable or knowledgeable of a particular drill provides a sense of security, because I know it and he doesn't know it, so I'm the one who knows. And I don't put this down per se, but it's not who I am. Again, I'm very iconoclastic. I don't have a particular style or system in front of me. I am, and by the way, this was taught to me by Filipino teachers. A teacher should distinguish himself. That's what a teacher is. Everybody in the class will know who the teachers are. Mm-hmm. Not the teachers who are teaching the class, but the young people who are coming out. Everybody will know who the teachers are going to be. Because they distinguish themselves. They take the art and they make it their own. They're not just another follower. Followers are a dime a dozen, but the ones who distinguish themselves are unique. And so if I was coming to study with you, I don't want to study your parroting of another teacher. I want to study your point of view. I may be drawn to the way that you, and again, this goes back to medicine. I may be drawn to the way that you explain the art. It may make the most sense to me the way that you explain it as opposed to the way he or she explains it. That's the reality in the world. I don't presume to be the teacher. Certain students won't learn well from me. The way I explain something, the way I convey it, just doesn't mesh with the way they think. That's fine. That's the reality. So the idea of security, there's a line in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. For security, the unlimited living is turned into something dead, the chosen pattern with limits. For security, there's a lot of security in that. If I have my blue belt, brown belt, whatever, I now know that I'm with the group that has the belt. All of those things are seeking of security. One of the things I like about the old men, the old guys that I studied with, was their first inclination was to dash your hopes, to destroy utterly any sense of security that you had, that you know anything. You probably heard the old men had a tendency to just laugh all the time. Every time you do something, they just cover their mouth and laugh at you. And I don't know, I'm a Westerner. I would take issue with that when I first started training with those old guys. But now I totally understand why they were laughing. It isn't that you're laughing at the person or about their stupidity. It's that they can't see what's right in front of them because they're looking at it through eyes that are seeking security rather than seeking knowledge. So that's worth repeating, that they're seeking security rather than knowledge. They're not actually looking to learn. They're looking to not be seen as not knowing. That's a search for security. To be able to actually outwardly and inwardly say, I don't know, and I'm going to go find out, is terrifying to most people. It's much more comfortable to say, I know, and you should study with me. So it's a very strong draw for people. It's why, I mean, the proliferation of certifications, certified instructors, it just makes me roll my eyes. Every time I meet one of these guys, it's like, you need to start again. Also, when I was a young man, when I was in my 20s, I could count the number of Tuhans in the world on one hand. One hand. I've met guys who were 30 years my junior in the martial arts, and they're Tuhans. So again, it's the search for security. Now I'm the Tuhan. I'm one of those. No, you're not one of those guys. So yeah, that's an awful thing. But again, it goes back to that same thing, the search for security. One of the things that this course actually, as I talk about it, one of the things this course is focused on is to get you whoever you are studying the course, to break out of that desire to be secure focused. Instead, can I actually answer this problem? I'm creating a problem as the person who's doing it with you. We're trading back and forth the creation of problems that are solvable within the context of the exercise. And then we're pushing the envelope, change the speed, change the intensity. Still, I talk all the time about that we can get anybody off the street to hurt us. Everybody concedes that the weapon will hurt you. Training with somebody who knows how to train means I can touch you with my weapon at full speed. So now you know you were hit, but you don't have to go to the hospital. So that's when the real training comes in. So your training skill and your fighting skill develop together. So, and that's oftentimes another mistaken thing, that people tend to jump directly to fighting. You just a moment ago said that people will say, "Oh, this won't work in the street." I'm not playing catch, which is what Sombra essentially is. It's us in the field playing catch, but it's catch with a little bit of stress. Years ago, I bring this up a lot about the complexity and sophistication of the brain that we don't even comprehend. There was a video, you can probably find it online, a video of two sailors. One is on a ship that is a refueling ship. The other is, I believe, on a destroyer. And the refueling ship is right next to the other ship, and they're refueling it. And it's rough seas, so the ships are doing this. And there's two guys on the decks, and they've got headphones on, and they're communicating with each other, and they've got mitts on, and they're playing catch. And they never miss. Think of how complex what they're doing is. Yeah. It's hard enough when they're on stable ground, but the ships are moving in every direction, and they're still able to calmly have a conversation and play catch. It's extraordinary. So Sombra actually is exactly that. There is no possible way that you could bring your brain into gear at the speed that we're doing this exercise. You cannot possibly be thinking about what you're doing. In fact, one of my teachers used to say the most important thing is to converse while you're doing it, talk all the time. Because your brain takes up, your speech centers take up so much of your brain that you're essentially forcing the art deeper into your subconscious when you do that. You'll notice with beginners that if you ask them a simple question like, "Where were you born?" it take 5 minutes for them to answer the question, because they have to figure out, what did you say, and they have to decipher it, because all of a sudden they've lost that capacity. But with somebody who's skilled, I can converse as easily as I am with you now at full speed Sombra, which is what you should be able to do. Because people might ask me specifically, why would that be important? Well, my skill is meant to be thoughtless. My brain and my intellect and my awareness of the circumstances is meant to be in making decisions. Is there somebody else in the room? Am I looking at more than one opponent? What weapon does he have? What's the legal reality here? I can, maybe hitting him once would be countervailing force sufficient to stop the action against me. But another shot might be punitive assault. I have to be able to make intelligent decisions when I'm using this lethal art at speed. So being able to keep your brain sort of in reserve, sort of like the conning tower on a submarine. The submarine's the war weapon, and the conning tower is the brain. We have to keep them, in a sense, separate so we can make intelligent decisions. You can attest to this in the emergency room, because everything is happening. You don't know what's happening. Everything's happening very quickly. It's the people who can maintain that calm, have their professionalism intact, and can make intelligent decisions on that fly and save that person's life. That's essentially what we're doing when we're doing Sombra. We're trying to press the envelope and make this a constant emergency situation. And now relax, breathe, make good decisions, and just flow. But that's when the flow, as I've said, that's when the flow actually means something. It's not this esoteric, "Ooh, I feel really good and I'm flying." It's not about that. It's being able to intelligently solve problems on the fly. You've seen it in the emergency room. You see it in sporting events. When we see some outstanding performance, that guy's in the flow. That's what we see.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that, as far as like your sort of like mental capacity and what it's been used for, because sometimes what I'd find is in the past, what I really love actually is when we're doing a set Sombra pattern that breaks, and then all of a sudden the student is feeling like, I don't know what's going on, but they're just being able to respond. It literally manifests in a physical way where they're trying to access their memory and recall, what am I supposed to do here? But they were already like their hands and their feet, they're already starting to do whatever they needed to do. And it's the brain, literally their brain, that got caught up because it was trying to find the right answer, but they had it already.
Well, I mentioned in the course that memorized information is inaccessible at speed. Your memory is essentially functionally useless. And in fact, if you start trying to access your memory, my first response as a teacher would be to increase the intensity, to make it so that you would eventually understand that the first thing you have to do is give up trying to do that and just be present. In fact, it's why I say when we do Come Alive, when we do the more advanced, again, patternless, formless aspect, it's not Sombra at all. It's completely different, but it is complete, essentially. The whole focus is being 100% present. The reason I can do it, and this is after decades of doing it, the reason I can do it and somebody else can't do it isn't because I've achieved some white eyebrow kung fu master on the top of the mountain kind of crap. It's because I'm awake. I can see what's happening. I've heard many teachers when I was younger, the common thing amongst Filipino teachers, they would say, "You are blind." That's what they meant. It simply meant that you don't understand it because you're looking the wrong way. You're focusing on the wrong things. And that's why they chuckle, that's why they laugh. And if people would realize that they can be their own teacher in that regard, because when they do get it, it might be on a random Thursday at 4 in the afternoon, it doesn't matter, but they will recognize that they got it. It will be a moment that they will actually have that epiphany where they actually say, oh, I actually get it now. And the false statement that I got it and saying that to other people will preclude you from ever getting it.
Yeah.
So it's why humbleness and being truthful is really important, especially as a teacher. One of the things that if I'm encouraging teachers out there, the first thing I would say is let the students know where your shortcomings and your failings are, and engage them in learning the art with them. Be the senior student in the school. Maybe more knowledgeable, but I don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. I've trained with guys who had been training for 70 years when I met them, and they didn't know everything. It's just not possible. You can't be a neurosurgeon, a maxillofacial surgeon, a hand surgeon. You just can't. It's not possible. So it's the same in the martial arts world. So if we can give up this mantle of having to be invincible, which is even worse, or just all-knowing, all-seeing, and realize that we are all students of this art, it just makes it so much simpler. It's such a yoke that martial artists carry around that holds them back from actually being able to find what it is, their expression. Because I actually take issue with people saying that martial art is about self-expression. I disagree. I think I've mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it in the course, but martial, obviously we know what that means. War comes from the god of war, Mars. But what is the art? Again, I can, as you mentioned, I can go back to art like painting or dance or music, whatever. The art that an artist employs or masters or has a talent for is essentially getting the medium of the art out of the way. So that they can say or express or show whatever it is they're wanting to show without any impedance by the craft. The craft has to get out of the way. So if I'm drawing you, the common phrase in drawing is draw what you see. That sounds very easy, but we get in our own way. So learning to do that is very difficult. When I was in the illustration school, we used to do this great exercise that you can sort of apply to martial arts. We would put a subject, for example, I might be doing a portrait drawing with you. I'd sit you in front of me, I'd put my table in front of me, I'd put my hand wherever I wanted to begin, and then I would cover the paper and do the entire drawing without being able to see the paper. That would tell me how much control of my hand I have, which is really what the craft of drawing is all about. How much control do I have in my hand? So eventually you could get to where your drawing without being able to see it was just as good as your drawing when you could see it. That's an amazing reality that we can do that. You can certainly write your name in the dark, so you have that control once you have the first contact. So we want to do essentially the same thing in martial art, but the art of martial art is relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Being in a ability to control the distance, time, and position of your body as well as your opponent's body so that you can get to victory.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not about how athletic you are, it's not about how flexible you are, not about how cool you look. It's not about any of that visual aesthetic that people focus on. Because the real, especially patai, that killing aspect, not attractive to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Ugly. It's designed to be brutal, and when you see it, you get that, oh my God, that's horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's beautiful. I think that's when the art comes alive, because now I know that's the real. And the real is what I'm interested in. So, but the art of martial art is relationship. It's the reason I can take the patai aspect and I can make it work.
Yeah.
Get it out of the way and be in a direct, pure relationship with my opponent. That's the whole focus.
Well, it really gets into the idea of like the essence of what it is. St. Thomas Aquinas said that his definition of art was the right making of a thing to be made, whatever the thing was, and however you determine it to be right. But you know, if the art is a martial art or a visual art or musical art, then that's however it's made. That would be the art of it. But speaking of visual arts, also it reminds me of I just can't remember the painter's name, but I don't even know if it's 100% true. But there's a story about when they're trying to back in the day in Italy, they were trying to find artists though that they could commission to do these paintings in a church or something. And they came to this one famous artist and they're like, are you going to submit something for the king or the pope or whoever it was to look at? And he was like, okay. So he called over his page or his assistant or something and freestyle with his hand, he drew a perfect circle. And he's like, show that to the king. And they're like, but this is just a circle. He's like, but that should be good enough. Because in his mind, it was like, that's how much control I have. I don't need to do some elaborate sketch or some sort of submission. You should be able to see it for yourself. So I like that very much.
I agree. Yeah. It's just the other evening we were doing an exercising class, and when I demonstrated it with one of the more senior students, I said, now how does it feel while I'm doing it to you? And he said, it's like I'm trying to block nothing. Like you're already gone before I get there. And I said, see, what I'm doing is I'm controlling the relationship with you, and that's why you're feeling that. So I know what you're seeking. I know that you're seeking to make solid connections with your blocks and get to a position of advantage. So I'm denying you that at every turn. But I'm not countering what you're doing. I'm in a continuous state of countering. So I'm not seeing what you do and then answering it. I'm already pre-countering everything. So that's why you can never get anywhere. That's ultimately, especially in the Kamalayan, ultimately that's what Eskrima is entirely about. It's about being so present, so understanding of what is possible with regard to distance, time, position, the kind of weapon in your hand, whether it's a stick or a panabas, whatever it is, that you can control the situation. And I don't mean in some esoteric, I have mind control stuff, but I am so masterful at what I'm doing that I've already answered the problems before you've asked them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like when you train with the old guys. And that's what every person out there who will apply themselves is capable of doing if they will simply apply themselves.
You know, it makes me think, because I've certainly trained with, older Filipinos, and one of the more frustrating parts to me as an American born of Filipino descent, is that they couldn't necessarily, to my ear or to my eye, couldn't articulate it in the same way that some other teachers could, because they'd be like, let's just play. Let's pick up your stick and let's just do this. And it was like, you see. And I would always feel like, oh, this teacher is so incredible. They can do all these things, but they can't teach. And I think I was judging them, but really what I was doing is I just wasn't allowing the opportunity to kind of appreciate what I was going through.
I would add to that as much as I seek to be the best teacher I can be, and I'm sure every teacher does that, at a certain point, I mentioned earlier that my opinion is that most teachers are simply sources of information. Mm-hmm. Now, whether or not they, in their lack of being able to speak the language that you may speak, there's still the capacity for them to be a source of information, but now the onus is on you.
Mm-hmm.
They no longer have the way that you're the most comfortable learning, which is in your language. I've trained with several teachers actually in my life who spoke no English whatsoever. So it was just maybe hello, and that was it. And we right away figured out that you have to be even more present. And one of my, something I say all the time is that my job is to provide an educational, safe, and enriched educational experience. Even here in my house, sort of like a museum, it's full of artifacts and so forth. The student's job is to actively steal the art from me. Not to wait to be taught, not to sit with a nose ring waiting to be attached to my chain, but to actually come in and actively steal the art, ask questions, inquire physically as well as verbally, watch intensely, come early, leave late, all of the things that is required to become knowledgeable because you taught yourself. Because I think ultimately all of us teach ourselves.
Yes.
I've certainly been in schools where 100 people started and 3 years later there's 4 of us because people actually applied themselves. The rest of the people were waiting to be taught.
Yeah.
So going back to the course, this is actually an opportunity for you to go, here's something I can steal. I'm holding nothing back in the course. I'm just laying it all out there. So if you want to actually understand this, and it's not just, as I think you will attest, it's not just how to do Samvada. I'm talking a lot about the principles that everything we do in the Filipino Kali are based on. So it's actually illuminating of all of that. So if you actually do seek to be capable and knowledgeable in this art, here's a great way for you to do it. So.
Well, you know, I do want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate the time that you've given already this afternoon. I could just endlessly ask you lots of questions, and I really love this kind of, you know, I love this interaction. But I guess to kind of finish up, you reference it, and maybe I just have, I don't think I've got, I don't get the impression that you're going to go over it in the course, but in our conversation today, you've talked about Kamalayan.
Yeah.
And then in the course, you also reference another format that you call quintada.
Yeah.
So briefly, or maybe if you can, well, I feel like you'd be able to, but briefly, are those other, I'm trying to find the right words, would those be like a next step or a concurrent kind of method to?
I understand what you mean. You'll see the term quintada used by lots of different Filipino martial arts. The term really just means accounting or keeping track of things or doing equations. You also hear the longer phrase that we all abbreviate to hubad. As you know, in some dialects, it means to undress. You have to be careful who you say it to. So, but really, the whole idea of the hubad is to untie and hit, to tie up and hit. So both of those things, quintada and hubad, I would actually say that hubad is an expression or a simplification of quintada. Quintada is a little bit more in-depth in the idea of what it is, but really it is a descriptor of something that you do within an exercise. So, for example, I might say that your quintada is really good. Your ability to solve equations on the fly is good. The way that I teach quintada is not a specific thing. It is, again, it is the description of the way that you're performing. It's more of an adjective. So Kamalayan is, while it is also can be used as an adjective, but the idea is quintada and hubad exist within Kamalayan. Kamalayan is an overarching, again, the perfect analogy is simply randori. It is a way that we can, working with weapons, it is a way that we can do everything that we're all told we can do, like disarms, disarms, counter checking. All of those things can all be done in a safe way at speed and still be able to walk away with our teeth and our vision and our IQs intact. And within that is naturally elements of quintada, elements of hubad, all of it is in there. In fact, when I show you Kamalayan, which I'd love to touch hands with you and show it to you, you will immediately understand why hubad is not a drill, it is only an idea. The mistake people make, just like they do with Sombra, they have learned a 6-count pattern in a seminar, and were told that that was Sombra. Well, it was, but it was a cycling exercise in Sombra meant to give you the feeling of Sombra, but it was not Sombra. When I teach you the patterned exercise that is the hubad, yes, I am doing the hubad within that exercise, but that exercise is not hubad. You see what I mean? Because hubad is an idea; it's not a technique.
Yeah.
So if I take it away from that and put it into other things, I can show you hubad, and you'll immediately understand. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing in that drill, but devoid of that pattern. So now it's actually just flowing. So it really becomes real flow. And the beauty of it is that there's pretty much no other exercise you can name where I can actually defeat you in the exercise. Sombra is there's no winner, it's only a give and take.
Yeah.
So I can cause problems for you, and I can land my shots on you because your skill might not be high enough to cover them. But I'm not going to hit you again. I'm just going to let you throw your next shot back at me. There's no true winning. But in Kamalan, I can actually beat you, and that is from the minute you start learning it. That is the objective: is to defeat the enemy, is to get to checkmate as quickly as possible. And when I show you how to do it, you'll immediately go, well, now I understand Sombra. Now I understand, as I mentioned, the hubad. Now I understand what kontata means. Now that's why I refer to it as the apex. It is the higher form, because there's no way to go above that unless you just fight. So
yeah.
So yes, it's actually it's probably going to be the next course I focus on. I'm going to be doing a couple of smaller things that will be sort of part and parcel to Kamalan, like grip breaks and so forth like that. That will be smaller offerings, but the Kamalan will be at least on par with the Sombra course, if not even more in depth, because it's much more comprehensive.
Excellent. Well, I really would love the opportunity to touch hands and converse in person. I did see that on your website you're going to be starting Zoom classes, I think.
Monday, yeah, not this coming Monday, which will be Memorial Day, but the Monday following.
Are you able to share anything about what those classes will kind of be like, or what they will entail?
Oh, great question. When I teach in a class, or even when I teach a seminar, I never make a class plan. I just come in, and whoever's in the class, I'll immediately, if I know the students, I'll immediately know what they need. So the class essentially creates itself. In a seminar, if I go with a class plan, I feel kind of like I'm disrespecting the students, because they may want to actually understand much more in depth what I'm teaching. And if I just come with one idea, I may miss that opportunity. So I really don't teach that way. And so the class will be created by the people who attend the class. So, for example, if you were part of the class, your questions would guide what we work on in the class. So, so I want that same organic quality that I have in my personal physical group classes to happen in the Zoom class. So I can actually illuminate whatever aspect people are interested in. The class may end up being, at least a portion of it may be just a conversation about the art, maybe a conversation about the art. I don't want it to get too much into, I mean, people are needing physical guidance in how to do this art. So if they want to talk about anything like that, there's so many books and literature that they shouldn't take up class time with that. They should take the opportunity to, as I said, steal the art from me, which is, I'm happy to have them steal it from me. I find it funny that people are still of the mindset of holding the art back for some reason. The art dies if you hold it back. So it'll essentially be an open format. We'll create it as we go. Right now, I think I only have a handful of people signed up, and that's fine. It doesn't matter how many people. I'm not gonna cancel unless obviously there's 0 people. But if it's a half a dozen, if it's a dozen, if it's 5 dozen, it doesn't matter. I want people to feel like they're personally studying with me, which is the way I will approach it. Students will actually be students. It'll essentially just be an extension of my school proper. So.
Well, that sounds great. I have to check the days and times, but if I'm not here at work, I guess I could if I'm here at work. I mean,
just grab somebody and just start blocking.
Yeah.
Got an emergency room there, I'm sure. So just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, we are in a hospital. There's plenty of resources if we need it.
What better place to train?